In previous lessons, we worked on the role of scaffolding, and we described 3 different levels of scaffolding that we follow as teachers of English. We described a scaffolding level 1, which is part of the planning of a whole unit, scaffolding 2, which consists of the procedures used in a particular class, and scaffolding 3, to refer to the interaction in the moment-to-moment communication in class. Today, we are going to focus on scaffolding 2, that is, on the task sequences that we use to develop activities in class. To do so, let us start defining what a task is. First of all, let me say that a task is the minimal unit of a class. A task should be primarily focused on meaning. That is, when we talk about a task, we are referring to a language activity that satisfies these 4 criteria. The first one is that there should be a primary focus on meaning. Students will be using the language to speak about something, to use language for a specific purpose, communicative purpose, and not just to practice language. This is the main difference between an activity, as we know it, and a task. In a task, there will also be some kind of gap, and this gap will be a communicational gap that will consist of a gap of information, or a gap in reasoning, or a gap in opinion. That is, students will be conveying their opinions, or they will be conveying information, or they will be conveying the language resulting from a process of mental activity. But language will never be used to practice language. In fact, language will be used with a communicative purpose in mind. To do so, learners will resort to their own resources, both linguistic and non-linguistic. So they will be using what they know, the whole background that they bring to the situation, in order to communicate, in order to use English to do something. And finally, there will be an outcome that is other than the use of language. So, in a task, for example, the outcome will be that students will have the information that they need, or they will know the opinion of someone else, or they will achieve something through the interaction. In all cases, as we are describing right now, language is used with a communicative purpose in mind. And let me insist on this notion. It's not just using language for the sake of rehearsing language. Much on the contrary, language is used in such a way that we do something with it other than simply using it to learn English. This is precisely what distinguishes a task from a situational grammar exercise. In a situational grammar exercise, the main focus is to practice language. So this is the reason why very often students find answers and they have to complete the question. So in that particular case, notice that what is natural is to pose a question and get an answer. We don't go about in the world posing answers in order to formulate questions. Much on the contrary. In a task, students will ask and answer to exchange information of different kinds. There will be a gap of some kind, and there is a communicative reason why students have to ask questions and answer them. So tasks can be focused or unfocused. An unfocused task is one that is designed to provide learners with opportunities for using the language in a general communicative way. So this means that the teacher is not thinking of a specific linguistic item that will be elicited from the interaction of the task. In fact, language is used globally. The student will use all the linguistic resources at hand so as to respond to the task. In contrast, a focused task is one that is designed specifically to provide opportunities for communicating using some specific linguistic feature, in general, a grammatical structure. So notice that in this particular case, the teacher designs the task so as to elicit a specific linguistic item in the interaction that is to be used by the student. In general, we tend to start sequences with unfocused tasks when we are working with an introduction in the lesson, when we are recycling what students already know and using this that they already know to set a context, a new context for the class. Then we pass on to focused tasks once we want students to start using a specific linguistic item, and then we go back to unfocused tasks. That is, we want the students to be able to integrate this new item into their general knowledge of English by using the language without a specific focus. Notice that tasks can also be divided into input providing, output prompting, or integrative tasks. An input providing task is one that engages learners in listening or reading. That is, students receive, and let me highlight this word, receive actively, language through listening and reading. They are exposed to the language, and there are processes of comprehension involved that will require from the students to understand and show this understanding by ticking a correct answer or ordering or writing a number to establish a sequence. So input providing tasks engage learners in receptive activities. In contrast, an output prompting task is one that engages learners into speaking or writing. That is, students' output is prompted here through output prompting tasks, and these tasks require students to use the linguistic knowledge that they have in specific ways through production. These specific ways can be, as you know, with a focused or an unfocused linguistic objective. Now, in some cases, teachers design tasks that require to integrate the skills. Very often, in a single task, there's a reading activity, and then students have to respond, they have to answer questions, and they have to use oral or written language to do so. In that particular case, we are referring to an integrative task. That is, a task that involves two or more skills and that tends to combine receptive with productive skills. So as you can imagine, an integrative task is much more complex since it requires students to understand and produce language. This is the reason why very often we start with input providing tasks so as to facilitate understanding the language, new language in a lesson. Then we pass on to output prompting tasks so that students can start rehearsing this item in a clear context of use. And finally, we request students to carry out integrative tasks. This is in general what people tend to do when they are planning lessons. But this doesn't mean that we follow this as a rule. In fact, teachers' creativity is encouraged because these different types of tasks encourage teachers to assemble them in ways that are friendly for our students to be able to learn with confidence.